Hello and welcome to Africa Today. I am Esther Mokwariola. In a world where the demographics are never the same, Africa is evolving to the point where cities are growing, urban life is expanding, and countries are beginning to witness rapid population growth side by side with passive, sustainable development. Nigeria readily comes to mind as the country to watch, with the oil-rich nation possibly home to almost 200 million people, perhaps an indication of more childbirth and less human death. And so we ask, what are your thoughts on the challenges and potentials of Africa's rapid population growth, especially in Nigeria? You can join the conversation and share your thoughts with us on Twitter at TVC News NG. We take a report now, and Africa Today will continue. Welcome on board.
Recent figures from Nigeria's National Population Commission shows that the country's current population is nearing 200 million. As at the last census in 2006, Nigeria's population was put as 114 million. Just over a decade later, it has become the 7th most populous country in the world, where 1 in every 43 person in the world is a Nigerian. Nigeria is now projected to become the 3rd most populated country in the world in the next 30 years and could overtake Pakistan, Brazil, Indonesia, and the United States by 2060 at the rate the country's population is growing. While young people make bulk of the country's population, the average youth often feel excluded from the major decisions and is left to contend with the side effects of weak institutions, poor infrastructure, and a corrupt political class.
Today in Nigeria, there's an alignment and realignment of social forces. The Nigerian youth are becoming more conscious of the fact that we must take over leadership to give positive leadership to the people. And that is the reason why I am here. Other people are all over the place too, doing the same thing. Our belief is that by 2019, it will signal a new narrative of youth development in Nigeria. And so youth should come into Nigerian politics more better than before to give positive governance.
We will not align forces with the older generation to blackmail the younger generation until a case is confirmed. You understand me? That can show us that okay, the member of our generation has actually misbehaved in society. So the case of Dino Melaye is still on suspense until the end of the matter.
Over the last 50 years, Nigeria's urban population has grown at an average annual growth rate of more than 6.5% without commensurate increase in social amenities and infrastructure.
Welcome back. At the time of independence in 1960, the oil-rich Nigeria was with a population of about 45 million people with huge prospect for development, as it ranked 13th in the world's population index. 57 years down the line now, Nigeria finds itself on the 7th spot, with the recent population estimate by the National Population Commission showing that the West African nation could hit 198 million, more than 2% of the world's population. Well, joining me in the studio on Africa Today, I have Adeniyi Kunu, researcher and a social commentator. And on Skype, I have Phillips Adewole, environmental activist, both in Nigeria. Good to have you gentlemen on the program.
Thank you very much for having me here today. Yeah.
All right, great. Now let me begin with you, Adeniyi. Let's look at the figures put forward by the NPC. Already there have been some critics about the numbers. What are your thoughts on the projection on what they've released so far as Nigeria's population figure and the critics over this set figures entirely?
Well, let me begin from the general. Ordinarily, there should be strength in numbers because with more numbers, you could do more. And that is why the likes of China, the likes of India, you want to talk about the United States of America, Japan and Brazil, that obviously are populated countries, really. They've been able to leverage the population they have. China 1.3 billion, India 1.2 billion plus. That's the generality of it. And you're talking about a situation where many persons will want to come into the market and be able to do more. Obviously, when you're talking about what enables a country to be, assessed as being successful, you'll be talking about human resource, quality of personnel in the country, capital formation, technological development, as well as social and political situation, generality. But when you come to the specifics, this is a country at the moment of 198 million people with a budget, 2018 budget of 23 billion United States dollars, to the tune of over 8 trillion. But let me shock you here. Egypt has a population of about 98 million, the third in Africa. The budget of 2018 for Egypt is 40 million US dollars. Which is lower than ours. Their budget is obviously more, but the population is lesser than ours. All right, fine. That tells you about the quality of people they have in their country. You want to go to South Africa, for instance. South Africa occupies the 6th position, more or less, in terms of population, so to speak. And South Africa's budget is about 116 million US dollars. If you go to Algeria, that occupies, I think, the 9th position, a population of well over 50 million or about, the budget of Algeria for 2018 is about 43 million US dollars. Then if I come to Angola, that occupies the 12th position in population, with a population of over 30 million, Angola's budget for 2018 is 124 million US dollars. So when you're talking about population, you also have to vary the investment you have in the lives of the citizenry of the respective country before you talk about the advantages. I've heard people, I've read people, I've listened to people who have come to tell us that the population of Nigeria is an advantage. But of course, it's about what you put in is what you get out. The reason why many countries are jostling to come into the country is because they've been able to make an assessment of how much they could get out of the country. You're talking about the policies. Do not forget the last time I came here, I have to say with every sense of truth that I was the one that broke that population that's current, 198 million the last time you invited me here. So I'm saying here that before we begin to cry hallelujah by virtue of this population, we have to do an assessment of the investment of government on these people. Now, last year, the budget of the country stood at 7.44 trillion. The question I want to ask is, what is the implementation rate of the budget? Less than 40%. Now, that budget for last year ran up until June, the one for 2016, the same thing, the one for 2017. Now, the 2018 budget, that is over 8 trillion, has not been even thought about. And you're talking about the year that is almost in half, because this is obviously, this is April. So whenever we want to talk about the advantage of population, I want to advise that one of the things we must consider has to do with what? The investment on the people. Now, if we look forward now, in the next, between now and, this is 2018, between now and the next 22 years thereabout, you'd have about 70% of world population in urban areas. Why is that is the question. Poor or lack of infrastructure in rural areas will definitely push people to the cities. And when they come to the cities, pressure will be on infrastructure. When pressure is on infrastructure, people cannot get value from government. Now, that is one. Crime rates will definitely increase. That simply means there's going to be security problems. Now, when people pour into the cities where they believe their lives will be better and there are no jobs, obviously the suffering of the people in the cities will increase. So you're going to have a cataclysm that must be addressed. So are you saying now with this population figure, it's more of a curse than a blessing? I tell you, it's a keg of gunpowder because you're not investing in the lives of the people. Talking about a man who, for instance, has 4 wives. Each wife gives him 6 children. 6 times 4, 24. And all the man has been able to do so far is to just have these children born. As they grow and look at the irresponsibility of the father or the inability of the father to take care of them, they turn out the way perhaps we don't want to imagine. Now, there will be more of problems first to the community where they reside. No education, no investment in their lives. They've not learned any skill. They don't have any skill. This becomes a problem, first for the household, for the community, and by extension the society. So the government should understand. Let's say this. All right. I've only given you figures now. Okay, point taken there, but let's quickly bring in Philip Adewole now. Philip, what's your contribution to what Adeniyi Joyce pointed out right now?
Well, I think I want to look at this issue from the perspective of how the government does things. Of course, if we notice, the chairman of the National Population Council, who actually mentioned this, that Nigeria's population was now 198 million, mentioned it in faraway New York. So, of course, there's something wrong with that in the first place. I may not want to dispute the figure so much. We may not even want to agree with the figure. We could actually even be more. The last population census was in 2006. And I think our constitution says we should have a census every 10 years. So the last census should actually be 2016, but there was none. And as such, even the figures that were mentioned is disputable. So if you want to project this to governance, like my friend in the studio has mentioned, the blame should actually be on government. I don't see population as a major problem. Like you have mentioned China, you have mentioned some other places, they have been able to manage their population and they have been able to manage their resources. But it must start from the way we do things. If something as important as the population of a country, we politicize it, I want to believe that even the chairman who went to mention that figure in the meeting in New York definitely went to do that because other nations were giving statistics and maybe for some reasons that are best known to him.
But if you think it was a projected figure, isn't it right to say that since 2006 till now, the population could have risen? It couldn't have stayed at 170, 180. Don't you think the figure could have been at that amount, if not, more?
It could actually be more. But what we are saying here is that something as crucial as the population of the country, we haven't joking with it. Because there was supposed to have been a census in 2016, and there was nothing like that. So we do not want to gamble. So what the chairman of the MPC has actually gone to New York to do was to gamble, because we could actually be more, we could be less.
Okay.
But if we cannot handle something,
all right, let's hold your thought for now. We need to go on a very quick break. You're watching Africa Today, and we've been looking at the challenges and potentials of Africa's rapid population growth, especially in Nigeria. Welcome back. Now, over the last 50 years, Nigeria's urban population has grown at an average annual growth rate of more than 6% without commensurate increase in social amenities and infrastructure. Now, with the recent World Population Prospects report and forecast, Nigeria will become the third most populated country in the world by the year 2050. So, Philip, how ready do you think how ready do you think we are for this number by 2050, being the third largest in the world?
I think I'll be very, very point of fact. We are not ready. We are not ready. I go back to what I said earlier on. It's an insult for us as a nation to go out there and declare a figure or projected figure when actually we have not done our homework well. But I could move a little bit further. Let's look at how we have managed our resources as a people. Let us see at how we have affected the lives of our people. Look at the oil sector, which is still, for instance. Look at corruption. I think the Transparency International Corruption Index for 2017 put Nigeria as 148 out of 180 countries. And according to Transparency International as of last year, which is the most current index, corruption is getting worse. So we are not investing in our people. We are stealing monies that should be used for the good of our people. I think there was this thing about 96 trillion in oil revenues since the 1970s that have grown weeks, have flown away. If we actually manage our resources very well, if we actually value our people, we will not be complaining about population. We will be using the resources we have well for the good of our people. Okay,
now let's look at the positives, Adini, on the population growth of the country. Even though it is said that, we're not ready for this, according to Philip, and from what you said, it's more of a curse than a blessing, there should be some positives that we can, get out of our huge numbers, so to speak.
For every country that has succeeded their successes are hinged on 5 critical points. The first will be human resource. That has to do with the investment of the people in terms of education, in terms of skill, in terms of the structure that enables them to be able to achieve their dreams or aspirations. That's one. The second has to do with the natural resources. Nigeria is, one of the leading oil producing nations. Now, there are other mineral resources, but they are normally, that is typical of this country, is that the states own the land, the government own the resources. So even in the glorious incapability of the federal government to explore the resources in the respective states, you still want to sit on it. That is a negative. The third, capital formation. What is the inflow of money into the country and what is the outflow of money from the country? Does the country make more money in foreign exchange, or does the country lose more in paying for things, particularly the debt-ridden economy that Nigeria is operating? Fourth, you want to talk about technological development. In 2018, you want to ask me what is the megawatts of electricity that is distributed around 198 million people? That's a question, because when there's electricity, technology functions. You are able to have innovation. Now, the fifth, political and social policies. Any country that gets it wrong in that regard gets it wrong completely, because you're talking about people, the social fabric of the country. Politics, obviously, governance is an essential part of any development in any country. So in all of these 5 ingredients of development that I've mentioned, any country that really is serious, we're not talking about the APC, PDP, SDP, we're talking about people who are serious, regardless of the political affiliation. They're able to put out policies that is contrary to any kind of ethnic or political leanings, but that can be referred to as a best practice across the world. And that is one thing that is very critical. If Nigeria must really see herself as to be considered a serious country, we must move above all of these things that bedevil us. One of that is our ethnic leaning. Another is not understanding politics. You find out that the last 16 years, the majority of people that are with the current party at the center, they were actually, they were in the opposition. Right. So we're talking about people who have political ideologies and they stand by it. In the UK, for instance, 3 generations have been conservatives. 3 generations have been conservatives. So I'm saying that if we really understand what it means, in the US, you have 4 generations that have been Republicans. Right. 4 generations have been Democrats. Right. But in this country, it is completely what I don't want to use vulgar words for, but I tell you, it is disgraceful. And that is why the people must begin to understand what are the choices that we have to make. If you check the demographics, between the end of the Civil War in 1970 and the year 2018, we've had the same set of people with their own ideology. So I'm saying that if those who are in their 40s, in their 50s, believe that their destinies can make them do better for the country, I think it is high time they came together and forged a front that will help their children, many of whom are not yet born, to be able to take us into
So now you're taking a little bit of the dynamics that we can gain from this population figure.
It is very important.
I get your analysis from this, but let's look at the ripple effect that we can get to, gain from this. Okay, Nigeria is not just, the 7th of the world populous country in the world. Is also ranked among the 3rd in West Africa, or the 1st rather, in West Africa. Now, in West Africa as a population, what ripple effect do you think it will have in the sub-region and the continent in general?
In the first place, people will always want to cut corners, especially when your policies are not good enough. It will be difficult for any Chinese industrialist to bring products or commodities into the United States of America, and the standards are low. You know that once you're caught, you get sanctioned properly. I think one of the things we must do is to evolve policies that portray us in very strong light in terms of international best practices, because no nation can stand on its own. Let's say this for the records. Many countries take more from Nigeria than we get from them. For instance, if you look at China, the Chinese people that I call white tigers now, they are coming into the African continent. Let me use Sudan, for instance. 40% of all the oil exploration and production in Sudan is controlled by the Chinese.
Now, you've not heard the last of this. In Nigeria, it is gradually becoming that because many of the loans we collect, much of the construction they do, they get it by taking crude oil out of the country. Now, that is not balancing the trade agreements between Nigeria and China. And I want to say here that Nigeria has the expertise to do much of those things that they do for us if only government is serious about getting its own people on the first platform before others. As Trump says, Nigeria first will be the version. So I tell you, the policies we evolve must change. And also people who understand our policies are put together, our government is run in 2080, because let me tell you, nobody's going to wait for us. Right. And I have to say that if you look at even those that occupy the positions of power, the advancement of technology at this moment, because if you look at it, Nigeria is in darkness by virtue of lack of electricity. But people have been able to go far ahead, but not the old horses. And I think we are saying this to be fair, that if we want to move ahead, let's address these core issues.
Point taken there. Now, let me quickly come to you now, Philip. With what do you think will be the challenge of this government to meet the target of providing the needs of every Nigerian, seeing that the number, well, might be overwhelming?
Well, I must be a point of fact again. This government, just like the governments we have had recently, do not have anything that it takes to make this happen. What we need, and the gentleman in the studio has captured what I would want to say. First of all, if we get it right in terms of governance, that is the first and most important step to take. If we get it right in terms of governance, that is it. What I would just encourage every Nigerian to do is to vote wisely in 2019. It's time we put people who have the interest of the nation first in governance. Once we get it right with governance, we will the early beginnings of ensuring that we have that resources, enormous resources, and we have the human capital to be able to manage it well for the collective good. Yeah, but that is only if we get it right in terms of governance. But what we see on ground, it is not there.
But if you were to give an advice to the party or to the government at this moment, what would that be?
Well, it's very, very unfortunate that I will say that with what we are saying, no, there's no advice you want to give them at this point that will make them backtrack from the path they have taken. Because looking at it, let us even start with this declaration on its own. You see everything wrong about it. So when you have it wrong with the kind of people we have in governance, you have people who are not, 21st century minded. There's nothing you say that makes sense to them. The issue of population is politicized. By the time you want to have a breakdown of the 198 million, that is where you now start having problems. One region will say they have more and the other, and we're not going to sit down and do anything credible except we have a good government. So it's a very, very unfortunate situation we have found ourselves. I think it's only when we as Nigerians vote right, leave all those ethnic sentiments, leave regional sentiments. That's when we'll get it, and when we put people who have the interest of the nation at there. But with the crop of people we have, I don't know what you want to tell them. I don't know what you want to tell them. Let's
tell them what we think or what we know is best for us as a people. Don't we have the right to do so?
Well, that is one of the things you are doing here. This program is actually to, draw the attention of government, to make them see reason. So you are educating the people. Nigerians are getting to know more about how the country is run and what should be or should not be. This is the right step to. It's not that those in government don't know all the things we have been talking about China and the rest. They have all these. They have these so-called technocrats. They have all. But for Christ's sake, we just have to get it right with governance. The people we have there are not ready to listen to these things we are talking about.
Thank you very much, Philip Adewole, for your contribution on Africa Today, and as well, Adeniyi Kunu. Thank you very much, gentlemen, on the program. Once dubbed the giant of Africa, Nigeria remains the continent's most populous nation, where millions are struggling to scale through the hurdles of instability and social inequality at a time when the size of its population is supposed to be a blessing. Beyond now, the turning point for Africa begins with a paradigm shift, where leaders would use politics and policies as a veritable tool in putting the people first for progress and prosperity. And that is our package for today. But don't forget to join the conversation as usual on Twitter at TVC News NG and follow me for updates around Africa at Esther TVC News. Until the next one, I am Esther Amokwariola, and always remember, Africa can only get better.